Hi there, this is Trisha. Welcome back to my channel. Today I am participating in a blog hop with Altenew for the standalone die release. And I've created this very pretty jewel-toned card using dies from this new release. I am starting out with the Whimsical Garden Layering die set, and I'm also going to use this Slimline Sentiment set. To get started with this project, I am taking the largest floral cluster from the die set, and notice that there are two layers for this cluster. There is a solid background layer as well as a detail layer that lays over the top. And I will cut these both from white cardstock. I've also chosen another little sprig that came in the set, and you can see there's lots of other leaves and clusters and other smaller flowers that I could use on other projects. The possibilities here are endless. So I've die cut these layers out, and when they stack on top of each other, you've got this beautiful detail on top, and you could make that, you could emboss that or stamp it from colored cardstock or even patterned paper. There's lots of options here. I decided to just use white cardstock here and ink up that base layer and leave the detail layer white. So I'm using these fingertip blending brushes. I love that they're a brush tip and not a foam. That gives me a really nice smooth blend. And I'm using some purples and teals and golden yellow inks. I will be sure to link all the colors in the description box below and a lot more detail over on my blog. And I will also link all the products that I've used here. So I'm just applying the ink with the blending brush. And every once in a while you see I pop that layer on top and just look and see if I like the amount of ink that I have behind there. And I've got some places darker than others to try to make those blooms look a little shaded. So I wanted my blooms to be purple and kind of dark teal color for the stems and leaves. And then those little small buds I did in yellow just to add a little pop of bright with these purples. So once I have that first cluster all inked up, I'm now considering how many of these I'm going to need. So I decide I'm going to plan out my composition for the card. I die cut the long, slim sentiment die that reads, "Wishing you a birthday as sweet as you." And you can cut that up into sections and run it horizontally or vertically across the card, but it looked really nice and fit nicely diagonally across an A2 card front. So I think I'm going to do that and have my flowers poking out from behind that sentiment. So I drew a little pencil line on the diagonal with my ruler there, and that way I can plan what flowers I need to fill that space on the left side of my diagonal line. So I'm going to play around with my die cuts and see how I want to arrange them and what I can fit in there. You can see I'm fiddling around with this one before I even ink it up to decide what parts I need to ink. So here's something to think about. You don't always need to use your die cuts exactly the way that they are designed. I decided I wanted a second floral down there just to add 3 larger blooms and make a grouping of 3 here. So I'm just going to snip off that smaller bud. So I'm going to ink that one up just the same way that I did the others, with the purple for the blooms and the teal on the stem. And then I've got a little more to work with for my composition. I think when I speed up my video, it looks like I'm really scrubbing hard on these with these ink blending brushes, but you don't have to at all. I'm using a pretty light hand and just, at building up the color. I think just this, the speeding up of the video makes it look like I'm scrubbing it to death. So as I mentioned, those smaller sprigs are going to fill in my design. So I'm going to ink a few of those in my color palette as well. I did one in the purple, one in the darker teal, one with a gold top and a teal base, I think. And I just wanted to add a couple more pops of color. Once I have my inking all done, now I am thinking that if I have this gold metallic paper behind all of my flowers, that would add a little drama and make them pop instead of just the plain white card base. So I'm going to run that paper along the diagonal. I'm using my ATG gun to add adhesive on one side of that diagonal line. That'll be the top left, triangular portion of my card. And I line that gold paper up right with that pencil line that I drew and adhere that down to the front of the card. Then I can flip that over and use my long scissors and just trim off the excess. So now I've got a cool background that'll look really pretty with those jewel tones. And I like how that looks a lot. So before I actually adhere those down, I do need to put the detail layer onto the background layer. And I'm just going to use some liquid glue for that. I could have die cut these detail layers from an adhesive backed cardstock or added some two-way tape like sticky sheets to the back of a piece of cardstock. But I find that working with the Nuvo glue or any liquid glue that you have works just as well. And what I like about it is it gives you a little bit of fiddle room when you put these intricate dies on top. It doesn't set up immediately, so you have a second to work it around with your fingers or with a pokey tool or a tweezer to get all those little elements, even the stems, lined up nicely so that it looks seamless when you've got the layers put together. Once you do get your top layer down, I do give it a nice firm press either with a bone folder or just hold it down with my fingers just for a minute or two until that glue sets up. So I'm going to do the same thing, dotting on the adhesive for that smaller sprig that I snipped off. And then those other little dandelion looking sprigs, they don't have a detail layer. So now I'm ready to start my composition. So anywhere that the die cuts are going to overlap my diagonal line, I'm just making marks with a pencil there, and that'll help me know where to cut. So I'm going to go take my trimmer and line up my pencil marks with the blade of the trimmer and just give that a snip. And then my die cuts just butt right up against the edge of that diagonal line, and they look like they're sort of growing out from behind. And then I can snip over any leftover pieces that won't be used, and then I can incorporate them into the composition in other places. So I'm fiddling around with that now and trying to figure out where I want things to live on my card. And I did decide to add another leaf. So off camera, I inked up another leaf with its detail layer and adhered those together. And another little yellow bud that I'm doing here now that I'm snipping off. So I'm repurposing these die cuts so I get bits and pieces of them in order to make them fit my design. So there's the other little bud that I'm putting on there. And I'm finishing up my inking. And then I can adhere that detail layer on top. So this card, color palette wise, is such a stretch for me. I like sherbety spring colors, pinks, and so this really deep like jewel tone, this teal and purple, I love how it turned out, but it is not my comfort zone. So I don't know. You guys will have to tell me in the comments if I managed to pull it off. I'm not sure. So I'm snipping, just like I did with the other elements, I'm snipping the overhanging bits of my die cut that are going to meet up with that diagonal line, and I'm just using my trimmer for that, marking things off, and now I've got my composition set the way I want it. Making another pencil line there. For the tiny ones, you can just do it with your scissors. So originally I thought that I would have my sentiment in black, but as this card evolved and I ended up putting the gold, I decided that I would cut the sentiment from the gold metallic paper as well. So again, this is the Slim Sentiments die set, brand new from the release. And this is a nice happy birthday wish. And I am going to use that sentiment right along that diagonal edge. But since I have all the busyness of the flowers there, I'm going to keep it below the diagonal line instead of overhanging above it. And to make that stand out even better, I thought I would put black on the other half of the card, and then that would really make that sentiment pop. So I'm just checking that out and seeing if I like it, and I do end up deciding to do that. So before I adhere the black to the bottom, I don't want to mess up all my composition, so I'm just going to use my Nuvo glue again, my liquid glue, and dot it on all of these pieces and adhere all the elements to my card. And when you have your composition set, you can do a couple things. You can either, sometimes I take a picture of it so that I know how to recreate it the way I like it, or you can pick up just one piece at a time with tweezers very carefully the way I'm doing here, and then put it back into place. Now I don't have anything overlapping, so this works well in this case. You can also use the press and seal, like the Glad press and seal wrap, to keep a composition in place. But I just picked things up one at a time since I don't have any overlaps here, and added the glue and then put them back on my card base. So now I'm ready to adhere the black to the bottom triangle of the card. And I'm just using my liquid glue because it happened to be sitting there right in front of me. And I'll do that the same way. I'll butt that right up against the diagonal line, press it down nice and firm, make sure it's adhering well, and then after I give it a minute to dry and I've pressed it pretty well, then I can flip it over and trim off the excess, just like I did with the gold paper. And I like to use a nice long scissors for this. I feel like I get a nice straight cut. While I'm at it, I can trim any little bits and pieces of die cuts that are overhanging the edge, and that will clean up my design on the front. So what I have left to do now is to add the sentiment, and again I'm just going to dot teeny little dots of liquid glue. When you've got something this detailed, you really want to be sparing with it so it doesn't ooze out in between. I've just got the tiniest little dots, and then I'm using my tweezers, and what I want is that to really line up tight against that gold edge so it almost looks like it's a part of that gold triangle up at the top. I'm going to try to get it as straight as I can, and to help me with that, this is a tip with a linear die cut like that. I'm just taking the edge of a ruler and putting it against that line to make sure that there's no warping, or just kind of keep that nice and straight. Now the tiniest bits of those corners come out the edge of the card, so I'm trimming those off with my scissors as well. But you can still read the whole sentiment. It was just a little bit of the edge that came off. So if you ever do get a tiny bit of oozing or a dot of glue anywhere, I have this adhesive eraser, and that totally did the trick. Somehow I got a dot of glue on my gold metallic paper, and I just very gently rubbed that adhesive eraser and it got rid of that so that I didn't have a shine spot. Another trick, if you do have a glue spot or anything like that, is to cover it up somehow. I am not doing that here because I was able to get it off with that adhesive eraser, but I did think I wanted to add a little bling to this card. And I just had clear rhinestones, adhesive-backed rhinestones in my stash, but I wanted them to coordinate with my color palette. So You can always take alcohol markers or Sharpie markers and color your pearls or rhinestones or any gems you have. It works just great. So you just give them a second to dry. I'm using some same colors, purple and yellow and teal, and giving various sizes of those colored. And then once they have a second to dry, I can adhere them to the card. So I just use my pokey tool normally and kind of fish those off of the page. And the way that these work, they have adhesive on them already. So I just lightly lay them on the page and get them all organized where I want them. I can move them around really well. Once I know where I want them, then I really press them down and then they stick well. But you can see I'm fiddling around with them and moving them before I really activate that adhesive. So after I finally got those organized and stuck them down, I have a completed card. And I love how this turned out. It's really bold and striking, like I said, a little different than my typical card style, but I just love it. You get texture from using those die cuts, and I feel that that slim diagonal sentiment is a fun surprise. So thanks as always for stopping by and spending time here on my channel, and I hope you are checking out all the other stops on the Altenew blog hop and all the other amazing products in their new release. Thanks again. Have a great day.